You have a lot of fraudsters out there who are already getting ahead with AI and deep fakes and all. The only way to stay on top and keep people safe, learn the system yourself and get ahead of it.
Almost every year, you've basically climbed the ladder and got a promotion.
You look at senior management roles and leadership roles in GRC, they're overwhelmingly male and predominantly white. GRC leaders will have to not only think about auditing human beings, but also auditing AI.
So when you're looking at new companies and roles, always take a look at who's in the leadership team, what are their values, do they stand by what they say? Because representation, as you say, is so critical. If you can't see people already there, it's going to be that much harder. Welcome to Spotlight on Women in GRC, a podcast series counting down to the Women in GRC Awards 2026, happening on the 2nd of July. Backed by key sponsor CoreStream GRC, this series shines a light on the women shaping governance, risk and compliance, exploring their backgrounds, experiences and perspectives on what's changing across the industry. I'm your host, Lucy Montague, and today I'm joined by Jaypee. Hello, Jaypee.
Hi, Lucy. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, thanks for coming. Very looking forward to this conversation. Jaypee, would you be able to introduce yourself, just talking about your current role and a bit about your career journey?
Yeah, so I'm JP Soule. Some people know me as JP Soule. It depends on who's asking. And I'm VP Compliance and MLRO at PensionBee Limited. Um, right, I've worn many hats in my career, to be fair, but I started my journey into financial services in 2013. And I worked in retail banking. I worked with Lloyds Banking Group for several years. And then I pivoted into pension investments. I've been at PensionBee for 7 years and I haven't looked back, basically. The VP side of my role, VP compliance, I deal with a lot of like regulatory compliance and the MLRO part, which is an SMF 17 role. Is the money laundering reporting officer. And basically, it's my responsibility to make sure that my firm is in compliance with money laundering, anti-money laundering regulations. So day to day kind of looks like a mixture of both things, making sure that our regulatory compliance is up to scratch, policies and procedures are in place, supporting the first line teams. And regarding preventing financial crime, it would be ongoing monitoring, spot checks, ensuring that we have tools in place to mitigate the risks of money laundering and terrorist financing, and just fraud, generally speaking, financial crime, generally. Yeah, so that's pretty much my day today.
Very busy woman.
Yes.
And in regards to those two roles, do you split your time equally or how does it work? Are you basically just whatever comes onto your desk that week is what you prioritize?
I'll probably say the heavier part of my role is the MLRO because obviously I'm approved by the regulator. So that's my first like official responsibility. So I'll say I spend a lot more time on that. But because regulatory compliance also is a really big area, I'll probably say maybe 55, 45.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so it can be sometimes really even, and sometimes one might overtake the other. But I think it's a balancing act between the two things that I do.
Yeah. And when you look at your LinkedIn and your
Mhm.
work that you've done at PensionBee, it's so impressive. Almost every year you've basically climbed the ladder and got a promotion. They really, really like you there. How did you do
I
that, JP?
um I think I'm naturally an overachiever. I know what I bring to the table, and I feel like I'm well equipped to do what I do. And I'm a very focused person. So when I have a goal or I set myself a goal, I work really hard to achieve it. And I think I'm amazing. I'm like, that sounds crazy, but I personally think I'm amazing, and I'm just glad that the right people can see that as well and see how much I bring to the table, and that's why you can see that I've progressed like year on year, basically, and I'm still going.
Yeah, the inner confidence that you can just articulate so easily and say, yeah, do you know what? I back myself. I can do this. That's very inspirational. I love
I mean,
that.
I've always been a very confident person. I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing. I had a mom who made my siblings and I feel like there was nothing that we couldn't do. And I feel like she kind of instilled that confidence in me because she was a confident woman herself. And I think I got that from her. So there's rarely anything that I would say like phases me. And I've been through quite a lot. So yeah, it's about knowing, you know, what your strengths are and kind of like focusing on your goals and achieving them. And that's what I do.
Amazing. Shout out to your mum. Love that. Um, so if we go back to the beginning, what first drew you into the world of governance, risk and compliance? Was it at Lloyd's Bank or was it something before?
So I'll say like the seeds got sown when I was working in banking. But I think naturally, I've always, I think my values are very well aligned with compliance because I'm the type of person that I always wanted to kind of like work in like the legal system or like study law, even as a teenager. And this is because like I have this desire and this strive to always want things to be right and just, or to have like a good outcome. And I was always looking for a career that would align with my values because that's, I think, how you kind of like live the best type of life. I must add a caveat is that I'm a really creative person as well. So if I didn't kind of go into compliance, I feel like I would have been a creative instead. However, because of this desire and this natural, you know, value of integrity that I really like, when I was working in banking, I started to kind of, kind of gravitate towards more compliancy stuff, like doing like branch risk checks, and making sure that people have done the right processes and procedures correctly. I was really also drawn to our policies and how they were written. So I think the seeds definitely started from there. And I just like slowly worked my way into, first of all, first line compliance and then now second line compliance. Um, yeah.
I really like that because you're the first person I've spoken to on the podcast who has said it's been quite intentional. Normally, it sounds like people kind of fall into GRC, they've not really heard of it, but via law, they kind of get into it. Whereas for you, it aligned from your values from day one. And I think that's a great way of thinking about how we recruit this next generation and make it quite attractive and exciting.
That is
Yeah.
very true. Like I said, I feel like I've always thought to myself that it's really important to align whatever it is I'm going to do long term with the things that I believe in and I enjoy. And although it took me to become an adult, like a complete adult, to understand that becoming like a solicitor or barrister, sometimes the legal system or the justice system isn't always fair or just. And so compliance was like the next best thing. So although it wasn't like planned in the sense of I'm definitely going to go into compliance, naturally, the things that I showed strength in became the path I followed, because I had very, very strong investigative skills. I often joke around that I'm a little detective, and if I wasn't doing compliance or anything creative like fashion, I feel like I'll probably be working for MI5 or the police or the police. So um, I kind of get like a good balance working in compliance because I can then still do like sort of the same thing.
And with that creative angle, do you feel like you get to exercise your creative muscles in compliance?
I'll say yes, because I think most people, especially regulatory compliance or second line compliance, I think naturally, and this is what I mean, like when I say it kind of ties in with like my attributes already, most people see second line compliance or regulatory compliance executives as like the police, right? Like somebody that enforces the rules and makes sure that everyone does everything correctly. And I think where my creative side comes in is I try to not be too serious in how I like relate with people, because I think you can be firm and you can be focused but still have a personality, and
Mm,
maybe like beat the allegations of, oh, like, compliance people are like super strict, or they can't have fun, or they can't have a creative side. Now, I don't know whether I'm unique in the way that I approach things, but I feel like that has worked for me because I work at making myself really approachable and really down to earth. So when my colleagues and I bond on other things that I enjoy doing, or like my creative side, then it kind of like, we work better together, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I'll say that's probably how my creativity comes into it. I don't take life too seriously.
love that. Rebranding compliance, making everyone like them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Very nice. Next, I want to talk about the kind of industry perspective around what's happening at senior leadership level. So, women make up roughly 50% of entry level roles in GRC, yet only 17% of chief risk officers and 14% of chief compliance officers are women. Why do you think that gap exists?
Hmm, that's an interesting question. So I think in order to understand um, why it's happening in the first place, I think we should delve deeper into like the statistics, and I might look at it like from the reverse, because usually at entry level, it's 50, there's 50-50 representation. So we already know that the desire is there for either like gender to kind of like go into any GRC role. But statistics have shown that if you look at senior management roles and leadership roles in GRC, in the financial services space generally, they're overwhelmingly male and predominantly white. So then it kind of leaves you thinking, why do we have such a small number of women in the space at all? And the why, I feel like we can break down in like three parts. So if we look at like the gender disparity first, I feel like there's a lot of data that shows that men generally tend to get sponsorship throughout the progression of their career, where women tend to get mentorship. And for people that don't know the difference between the two, a mentor will kind of like help you like answer the difficult questions, like kind of help you navigate work and, any areas where you feel like you're lacking or give you motivation. But a sponsor is somebody that has the power to make a change behind closed doors, the power to back you so that you're able to progress. And historically, men tend to get a lot of sponsors, people that back them behind closed doors, where women typically get mentors. So that sometimes creates a drop as women progress. And if you look further, again, a lot of women, if you think about the transition between moving from like a mid-level role into senior leadership, it usually happens around about like 33 to about 45 years old. And that is the same time, it coincides with the same time that women are either having children, so they have like caring responsibilities. They might have elderly care responsibilities as well. And they have to take time out in those years to kind of like focus on life because usually they're the primary caregiver, especially if they're the ones bearing children. And I think the absence in those periods, which shouldn't really, it kind of like causes a barrier or delays progression because men don't have to take time away from work or away from their career to have a child. Now, granted, we have so many responsible men out there who are supporting, their partners in having kids and taking time off, but the primary responsibility usually falls on the woman for like bearing kids or childcare, and sometimes even elderly care. And statistics have shown that. So I feel like that as well, because those things are not considered and women kind of drop off when they take those absences in their career, it also affects, how they kind of like make it to the top. And I feel like all these reasons are almost like systematic habits in the corporate world that over time has just become the norm. And
Mm.
nobody has really kind of like moved or looked to change how, that happens. I think the last reason that I'll mention that I think might be the cause of why this happens as well is a lot of the leadership roles in risk and compliance. So, if you had to think about the responsibilities of a chief risk officer and a chief compliance officer, it requires you to have to push back and say no to other senior colleagues, like the CEO, the board, especially if you are in the know that maybe that thing is not the best, outcome in terms of like risk wise or compliance wise. And sometimes there's this struggle. I call it like the lose-lose situation, the catch-22 situation, where um, if you speak up and you're firm and you're assertive and you say no, it can be perceived usually when women do it as being aggressive or being
Mhm.
unyielding, where I don't think that quite happens for their male peers. And I think when women then decide to kind of like make themselves smaller and are a bit more, agreeable and are a lot softer, then they're perceived as not having what it takes to be able to handle the role. So I feel like they get caught in that like catch-22 where it's a lose-lose situation. And it's something that I think that people should think about and consider, that it's either you want a woman to be in leadership and do her job in the best way that she can, um, or you don't want that to happen. I find that there's a lot less pushback in senior male leaders when they make decisions. There's a lot less pushback than when it is a woman saying no, this cannot go ahead.
JP, that is the most comprehensive answer I've had to that question, and that has just led me to a number of different questions on top of it. The first one that I have to ask, because we've obviously spoken about your career progression at PensionBee, how do you get sponsorship? How have you managed to engage your colleagues and get them to speak positively about you behind closed doors?
So I don't I think it's less about like what I did. I think showing up
Hmm.
um as being the talent that is very much needed
Hmm.
um in a specific role or in a specific field. I think it kind of like speaks to you. I think there's something that I notice quite a lot, and I had to kind of like train myself out of it, is a lack of confidence in your ability to do something. And
Yeah.
because society already puts like that pressure where women feel like they need to work twice as hard or do extra to kind of like get ahead, um, I stayed focused on achieving the goals that I had to achieve. And I also had a remarkable amount of amazing women colleagues who and this is why representation matters, by the way, who backed me up and who sponsored me. And I'll speak a little bit more about that. So, our CEO and founder of PensionBee, she's female, and she's a parent, and she's an absolute rock star. And she almost intentionally works very, very hard to kind of like close that gender bias gap. So
Mm.
I have a lot of like women in senior leadership that I could look up to and know that that is actually possible and I can actually do that. She's currently my manager, but before she became my manager, my previous manager, who's our chief operating officer at the moment, was my very first sponsor. She worked closely with me. She could see how well I worked, and she backs me all the way. Several steps, even externally and internally, for me to progress without my asking, without me even thinking about it. Because she was like, "Look, you're amazing at this. I'm gonna back you and help you." And she helped me all the way through till I moved over into second line compliance. So I think it's two things. It's having complete confidence in your abilities. Um, I think there's some study out there that shows that usually when women want to apply for a role, and say there are like 15 things that you need to, there are 15 requirements for you to meet. If women don't meet all 15, most times they don't apply for it. Where their male peers are like, okay, I can do two of those things, or I can figure out the remaining 13 out, and they go all in. I think having the confidence in yourself and knowing that you can do it is the first step, and then
Mhm.
having the right people around you. And I say this because when I worked in banking, it wasn't quite the same. I was the
Mm.
same person, but I didn't have the same support. And
Mhm.
in banking specifically, it was predominantly white males in senior
Mhm.
leadership. There were no women that I could look up to and be like, well, if she made it there, then I can make it there.
Mhm.
And that made it incredibly difficult. So I felt like I was fighting the war by myself. And I
Mm.
didn't give up, which is another thing that's another trait that I have, and I feel like people should kind of like embrace. I never ever give up. I tried to crack the glass ceiling in banking, and I couldn't crack it, but I moved and I shattered it elsewhere. But I didn't give up. Before I left, I did make a slight dent because at the time I would always get awarded colleague of the quarter, which is something that would always happen. And I think I won it about four times. So I was already achieving and doing really well. And the prize you get is that you get to meet with like senior leadership. And every time, and you get to have like a nice fancy dinner and stuff. And every time I'll go for any of those, events, it would all be white male in the entire room. And I would challenge them to be like, do you not want to see someone like me here on the other
Wow.
side? So although I couldn't achieve it there, and I say this for anybody who's like stuck, in a career or a job where it kind of feels like you're struggling to progress, move. I made the move. I started from scratch. I left, I pivoted, started from scratch, and here I am. So if you're unable to do it in a place that's very, very rigid, there's always space elsewhere where
Mhm.
people will actually honor your value and help you and advocate for you and help you to progress. So I'll a big massive kudos to like all the great women that I work with. I think that has definitely helped me to kind of like navigate the biases and the barriers that I faced. And remember, I even have like a double penalty, right? Because not only am I a woman in GRC, but I'm also a Black woman in GRC. because when you look at the statistics, I think you mentioned it was about 12 to 20%, right, of women take up the leadership roles in like risk and compliance in GRC. Well, that drops even further when you
Mhm.
bring race into it. Ethnic minorities or ethnic heroes, as I like to call them, make up even a smaller 2 to 3% of senior leadership in GRC, which is absolutely crazy. So I knew that it was important for me to get up there so that somebody else can watch me do it and be like, that's actually possible. And it wasn't always easy, but I pushed through and I'm here and I'm gonna keep pushing, really. For instance, in our board group, our group board, um, there's a black board member, and her name is Lara Oyesanya. And she's the one that I look up to, and I'm like, okay, so board's also possible as well, because she's a black woman. She's an amazing solicitor and she's an amazing board member. And I look at her and I'm like, okay, there is representation. This is possible. And that's why representation is really important as well.
JP, that's given me like goosebumps. It's such an inspirational speech. And also just the thought of you going into that room full of white men and being like, what's going on here? I think that's the most iconic
Confidence,
thing. Yeah,
confidence.
I love
That
that.
all kudos to my mum. That is the confidence because there's rarely anything that I think of that I don't think I can achieve, except I just don't want to. And
Yeah.
whenever an opportunity is missed for me, I don't think about it as like a fail. I just think about it as, well, that's a loss to them because they've just missed out on a really amazing person or really amazing feedback or input or value. And I think that sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe it just wasn't the right fit or it wasn't the right thing for me. And I move on and I start again and I keep going. So yeah, I'll say that that has been my outlook to life, generally speaking.
Okay, so confidence, but also culture. So when
Culture.
you're looking at new companies and roles, always take a look at who's in the leadership team, what are their
Absolutely.
values, do they stand by what they say? Because representation, as you say, is so critical. If you can't
100%.
see people already there, it's going to be that much harder, as you say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, speaking of, have you personally experienced any barriers or biases in your career? And how did you go about navigating them?
I mean, I already spoke about this when in banking, it was really hard to kind of like move up. I watched myself and a lot of amazing colleagues only get as far as like a certain level. And it just seemed like there was a ceiling there that just
Yeah.
wouldn't allow you to progress. And although it kind of looks like there was no way out, I kept showing up every day. I didn't let it kind of like bring me down. It was disheartening a few times, I'm going to be honest with you. And I did have like a real think about what I wanted to do moving forward. But eventually I kept going and I kept showing up. And eventually, funny enough, it was I got a new manager who was also like he was like a regional manager. Bless him, he's a white male. And he backed me. He sponsored me. As soon as he got in and he looked at like performance, he pulled me to his office and he was like, have you really been doing this for so long? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, what's happened? I'm like, I don't know. I keep, getting, oh, not right now, maybe later. You're doing really well. We appreciate you, but nothing was actually happening. And and he said, this is going to change. And he did do it. So that again goes to show that no matter how difficult it seems, if the right people, the people who naturally have the privilege, who naturally have the power, they're in a position of power and influence, and they can make a change. And it's not just backing somebody who is not capable. You can see that this person's capable. You can see that there's definitely biases and barriers there. It's not enough just like supporting them and saying like, well, I can help you carry on where you are. You have to make the move to help them move along the way. And he was the only one that helped me progress when I was in banking, and I appreciate it till this day. I don't know where he is right now, but I appreciate it till this day, and that's kind of like, how I kind of dealt with it. I kept showing up. I never allow what's happening in my environment affect like my focus or my dedication. It can be hard. I know it probably sounds really easy as I'm saying it. It can be really hard. I have to consciously do that. But I kept showing up, and eventually the right person kind of like picked up on it.
I love that. An example of where a male was a true ally and
Yeah.
helped to use his privilege. Yeah, it's always good to hear. So we've spoken about how your company has supported many women into leadership roles. I'm curious, when you moved into that VP of compliance role and you're entering into the board meetings, how did you show up and how did you ensure that your voice is heard in those sessions?
Hmm. So I just stayed myself, if I'm being honest. I often see, I think people get flustered when they go like into boardrooms and when they go into like meetings with like people they consider like superiors or like, you know, senior to them. And they buckle or they kind of like shrivel and they can't really speak up. Um, I often just see people as human beings because I know that behind my role, I'm also a human being and I'm normal and I'm natural and I, go for my weekly shopping just like everybody else. So one good trick that I use is just to see everyone as like a normal person that I don't think about their position. I don't think about like what influence they have. I just think about them as another human being. And that usually helps to kind of like, like calm the nerves and not worry too much. And then I show up as myself because again, like I said, um, I'm my biggest cheerleader, and I have complete and total confidence in what I do and what I know. And I'm constantly evolving and learning because I think sometimes it helps when you have knowledge and you're an expert in the area you're working in. It makes things easier when you're in those rooms. Um, I'll probably also say is to practice, practice. I often say to people, practice and imagine that you're in a room filled with like so many people that you don't know and you had to like say something. Um, Usually in the board meetings, I just come up, I come as myself. I joke around sometimes in my presentations, and everybody kind of like smiles and laughs with me. And I think it's also probably, you know, down to how good board members we have as well, because they don't make me feel like, uneasy or stressed or feel like I can't speak up or say, what I need to say. I think we usually have like an open, nice, professional conversation, and that helps. So yeah, I always say to people, just think about them like like your uncle or like your best friend, because you wouldn't get nervous and you'll be honest and show up. And perhaps if you're in a situation where you come across like maybe a board that's not, that's very strict, or the atmosphere feels very stifled, you still remain yourself. Just stay
Mm.
yourself. And sometimes when you get feedback, it shouldn't always be taken negatively. For instance, you might get pushbacks. I think it's to learn the skill of like agreeing to disagree sometimes, or the skill of like considering the feedback that you've been given and going away to go work on it. I remember that I had a colleague once who had to present to this C-suite at the time, and they were really nervous. And they said to me, well, JP, what if they ask me a question I can't answer? I said, well, then you say, like, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question right now. Can I take it away and get back to you with that? I said, there's nothing that says you have to be able to answer on the spot. And you're a human being. So any normal person would understand if he's like, oh, I don't have that with me here, but I can grab it for you and make sure that you get it. And that will kind of like, calm things down again and you're good to go. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. So it's really centering around that inner confidence and backing yourself, as you said, time and again. It seems to be a theme for yourself, and also just not having to strive for absolute perfection when once you reach these
Absolutely.
senior roles. Yeah, completely makes sense. Can you share a moment where you have felt particularly proud or empowered in your career?
Oh yes. So I remember the year I had to take on the MLRO role. I had quite a lot going on my plate at the time. I had professional exams to write. I had some personal life goals to achieve that were absolutely important in how my life will kind of like pan out in the future. I had to get approval from the FCA, and everything just seemed to be happening all at the same time. And I feel like naturally that sort of pressure can make you feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing all these things at the same time. Maybe I should drop some things just so I can like balance life. Life felt like a lot at the time. And I think what I'm incredibly proud of myself for doing is sticking it out. Um, I did have good support because there were times when I felt like, oh, you know what, I should probably like delay like the FCA approval and like wait until next year to do it. And my manager backs me up. She was like, no, you can do this now. Like, I believe in you. If you feel like it's too much, then obviously like don't. But like, the courage that I needed to kind of like carry on, I got it. And I was able to get approved. It was all good. I passed all my exams and the tests and all my goals I achieved. And when I tell you, it all happened within like the space of like 1 month. It happened within the space of like 1 month. But now I can like look back and be like, yeah, you did that. So I
That's
think I was
incredible.
truly proud of that. And don't forget, like obviously there's like the work-life balance as well. Because I have family commitments as well. So it's not always easy to kind of like juggle all the roles that I have. Yeah, but I was able to do it, and here I am now.
I love that, JP.
Mm.
Looking ahead, what do you think will define the next era of governance, risk, and compliance, and how should leaders listening to this prepare for it?
Oh, that's easy. AI, the rise of AI. The rise of AI will be, I think, because at the moment, I feel like everyone's kind of like using AI to do like admin type stuff, like, editing policies, like drafting procedures, and it's like a tool that kind of like you're using to kind of like make efficiency better. But I feel like we're moving to the phase where AI is going to become like an agent, so to speak. And you would find that a lot of people in GRC or GRC leaders will have to not only think about the risks of like auditing human beings, but also auditing AI, which I feel like is really, really, it's a scary thought to kind of like process and think about. So definitely AI is a big one. And the way I think that leaders can kind of like prep for it is to kind of like get ahead of it, by learning more about the technology and how it works and how it can be used, so that you can start to learn ways to kind of keep up, because also AI makes everything so fast, right? Everything moves really, really fast. Um, I work in a fintech, and so technology is a big part of like how we kind of like run the business. And I feel like the thing for senior leaders to think about in GRC is how to get ahead of the fast-paced movement and learn more about technology, learn more about AI and how it can be used, especially in areas like, control, risk controls, and financial crime, preventing financial crime, and updating, moving from like a manual way of doing things to kind of like more ongoing monitoring, using technology to do that so that you can keep up. Now, I'm not completely saying let's cut out human beings because I don't think that's even possible. I look at AI every day and I know that a huge amount of human input is still required. But it's the fast pacedness of it that I feel like leaders definitely need to start thinking about and getting ahead of that so that you don't fall behind or you miss a beat and everything kind of goes wrong.
So for you, thinking about AI, does it excite you and does it suggest like a level of empowerment, particularly around like how much regulation is changing and the amount of things that you have to stay on top of? Or are you a little bit fearful? There's a slight caveat of, oh, let's see how this works out.
I think as a human being, I'm a little bit fearful. As a human being, I'm a little bit fearful. However, I have seen the good side of using technology and AI, and it does make things a lot more efficient. I must say, though, I do understand what you mean in that like all the regulations are like coming at a fast pace very, very quickly. But I think this is also as a result of the fact that AI is here and it's
Yeah,
moving so fast. So the
yeah.
regulators are also like rushing and running around trying to catch up. And so they're like dishing out so many things. And then obviously people in GRC are trying to like catch it as quickly as possible. So so I think you can use if which is why I said if you get ahead of it, you can use
Mhm.
AI in a positive way to kind of like help mitigate some of the negative things that would definitely undoubtedly crop up um, but by its use. But I'm I'm kind of like 60-40 ish.
Mhm.
So I'm like 60%, or this is a bit scary, and 40%, okay, this can work and we can use this to kind of like do things a lot quicker. I mean, the sort of things that I think about specifically for me in my role with AI is AI will probably be able to monitor behaviors and track behaviors a lot quicker than a human being can. And although you need like that oversight from a human being, when it comes to things like financial crime, and you have a lot of fraudsters out there who are already getting ahead with AI and deep fakes and all that, the only way to stay on top and keep people safe is to kind of like learn the system yourself and get ahead
Mhm.
of it. So that's
Yes.
why I feel like it's, you have to be open-minded to the reality that is the kind of life we live now, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting because the fraudsters are using AI. So they've doubled
Yeah,
your workload already. So you
absolutely.
can't turn up to a gunfight with a knife and expect it to all be okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very
People are even using
interesting.
AI for complaints. People are using
Mm,
AI to write complaints and they can do it within 5 minutes when it would usually probably take them a couple of days to draft a good complaint that would kind of like, so if people are then getting complaints data has kind of gone up, right? Fraud has also gone up. So yeah, it's keeping on top of it, I'll say, and figuring out how we can use it to kind of like create good outcomes and positive outcomes in the end.
makes sense. And we move into our final question here. Are there any books, podcasts, or people who have had a meaningful impact on your career that you'd recommend to others?
Okay, so I feel like outside my work life, I told you I'm a creative person. So I feel like in terms of like podcasts, I don't know whether any of the podcasts that I watch will kind of help anyone career-wise. I mean, there is the Diary of a CEO. I watch that probably a ridiculous amount of times, but obviously it covers like a wide range of things, so you can learn a lot from that. I'll probably say the Pension Confident podcast, which is a podcast that we do at PensionBee. Pension is a big part of people's lives, and I don't think a lot of people think about it. Most young people are like, well, I don't have to worry about that until I'm much older. And they lose those like really important years when they can kind of like build their pension pot and kind of like plan for retirement. So the Pension Confident podcast is definitely one that I've been in, and I'm sure you've seen. But also it just kind of like gives you like really, really good financial nuggets that are pension related and just like financially, just generally. So that is definitely one I could recommend. In terms of books, I I'm a big book reader. However, there is the only one book, in my opinion, that's helped me in my career that I could recommend to people. And I'm sure by the time you hear what it is, you're going to probably be like, how is this even possible? But it is the Bible. The Bible is the one book that helps me in every area of my life, including compliance. In fact, you could probably learn more about compliance in the Bible than in any other book. I would probably dub it the very first compliance book that has ever existed in this entire life. So, if
Wow.
anyone's interested, the Bible's definitely one. But I also recently went to a book launch. I probably have that book somewhere.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
This is where we met, JP.
This is where we met. I don't know
Yeah.
if you can see it. Oh, yeah, but it
How
is
to.
How to Be a Chief Compliance Officer. I haven't read it yet, but I did go to the book launch, and I think it has really, really good things in there that can kind of like good practical things that you can do if that's the career path that you're going for. So I think that's a really good one to kind of like look at or read. And in terms of people, seeing as my mom is not an option, I would say that my CEO, and I'm not bigging her up because she's my CEO. This woman is a genius, period. So if people want to go and check her out on LinkedIn, Romy Savolva, she's to me, I think she's a good role model of like, you can literally do anything type of person. And she's built a business that is supporting women and just people, just people generally speaking. And also Tess Nicholson, who was my previous manager, she's the chief operating officer. She's an amazing sponsor, an amazing support system that I personally have had. And I feel like in terms of like people who have indirectly impacted me at work, I told you I work with amazing women. There's Lisa Picardo. She's our chief business officer. She's amazing. These are the people that I like deal with and work with every day, and they kind of make me realize and understand that I can do it. If they can do it, then I can do it. There's Claire Riley. She's our Chief Investment Solutions Officer. You can go follow her on LinkedIn as well. Who else? Have I missed anyone out? And obviously there's Lara Oyesoya. She's our board member, and specifically for me, because she's a Black woman who's a board member and who's doing amazing things. Um, she's my picture to kind of know that it is possible, and I'm going for that board position next. Not her one, but just like generally speaking, like that it can happen and it's achievable. Yeah.
You are such an advocate for PensionBee. Honestly, I want to
And
go
I'm not
over
just I
there.
promise, I'm not even just saying that.
No,
I
I know,
mean,
I know. You
yeah.
just love it. And you can just tell you are having such a lovely time there. And the
Oh,
proof is in the pudding to be able to list so many female names off and be like, they're in leadership and they're on the board and they're in leadership. It's just so impressive. Thank you so much, JP. If
thank
anyone wants
you.
to hear, thank you. If anyone wants to hear more from JP, I would highly recommend that PensionBee podcast. You did a great one around spotting signs of financial abuse. That really got me thinking about, as you say, pensions and familial relationships with passwords and all sorts of things. So thank you so much. And we will be seeing you next week at the awards, the Women in
Absolutely.
GRC.
I
Yeah.
look forward to it.
So I will see you at the awards, and I hope to see many of you who are watching this in London at the awards. Until then, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye bye.